Welcome to the latest edition of Actuary Voices, the podcast from the American Academy of Actuaries. I'm your host, David Nolan, the Senior Director of Marketing and Communications at the Academy. In this edition, I'll be chatting with Marcela Granados, the President of the Organization of Latino Actuaries. Marcela, welcome to Actuary Voices.
Thank you for having me, David. It's a pleasure.
So tell me a little bit about yourself and how you became an actuary.
So I'm originally from Mexico City, and while I was in high school in Mexico City, my math professor came to talk to me and said, "Hey, you're really good at math. Have you thought about what you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "I want to study mathematics." He looked at me and said, "Oh, that's a great choice. You will probably end up like me, being a professor, either in university or in high school, which is great. I'm actually personally, my mom is a teacher as well, so like I have a lot of respect for everybody that teaches. So I said, like, yeah, that's good. And then he looked at me and said, or you can become an actuary. And it was late 90s.
Yeah.
And I personally have never heard about the profession. And I was curious enough to ask him to tell me a little bit more. And he said, like, well, basically it's the same thing, but it's, it pays well. And you have the capability of use your math skills on whatever the problem is that involves measuring risk, managing risk, and I thought it looked very interesting. I found out more around what it would take to become an actuary and fell in love with the profession.
And which university did you go to?
It's called UNAM. It stands for National University of Latin America. So it's one of the largest universities in Latin America, and by far the largest in Mexico City.
Sure. In my previous job, I worked with a couple of people who lectured there. We did some work in Latin America, and they were lecturers, and they were kind of like Renaissance men. They had lots of skills, and it's interesting. I know that Mexico has got a very vibrant actuarial community because certainly some of the people who've been on the podcast, they fell into it by accident, the actuarial profession. But I'm aware that there are a couple, if not three, actuarial associations in Mexico that represent very well.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that the biggest challenge that we see in Latin America is that you become an actuary. You are able to work as an actuary if you get an actuarial degree. So part of when I went to UNAM and studied actuarial science, my perspective was that I would stay in Mexico and get a job as an actuary. I ended up leaving and coming to the US. And my biggest surprise was that when I went to get a job as an actuary here, that's when I found out about the actuarial exam. So I had to kind of start all over again, even though I did have my actuarial degree from Mexico, because, obviously here you cannot get a job without actuarial exam.
Sure. And well, tell us what brought you to the United States?
Actually, I was unemployed by more than a year in Mexico. My university went on a strike because we were fighting for people respecting the third article of the Constitution that says that university, like education, specifically university, has to be accessible to everyone, especially those that didn't have the income, like just like low class. And the president at that time wanted to change the interpretation of the Constitution and start charging for all of this. And we went on a strike for more than a year. The strike ended. I was able to finish my degree, but the repercussion after I was done and was looking for jobs was that people didn't want to hire from UNAM. That was the reality. People wanted to hire from other private universities, and I was very lucky that I'm also a U.S. citizen.
Mm.
My dad went to Harvard University. He did a PhD in internal medicine, immunology over there, and my mom was pregnant at the time, and I was very, very lucky to be the only person in my family that was a U.S. citizen. So after I couldn't get a job in Mexico, I moved to the United States, back to Boston. My dad gave me a very good advice, which was, why don't you try to get into Harvard University? At first, I laughed because I said, if I couldn't get a job in Mexico City, what makes you think Harvard University would be interested in me? But he said, take a look at the classes that Harvard University gives. Find a professor. It doesn't have to be on actuarial science because obviously they don't necessarily, even at that time, they didn't offer that. But the beauty around math is like math is everywhere. So I found a professor called Marcello Bianconi. He was teaching economics at Harvard University. I looked at the syllabus of his classes and I wrote a cover letter on why my background and everything I've learned in actuarial science back in Mexico in UNAM would line up with what he was trying to teach. So I got accepted. I went to Harvard for a year, and I was also able to get to know Professor Howard Mahler. He wrote a lot of the papers on credibility theory.
Uh-huh.
He was teaching at John Hancock back in the day in person, to pass these exams. The first exam, probability, and um, and I went to classes and you know took my first actuarial exam. So that coupled with having Harvard University in my resume allowed me to have my first job at Liberty Mutual.
Wow. Okay. That's quite a story. And tell us a little bit about your professional career now. As you say, you started at Liberty Mutual, but you've moved on from that now. So do you want to tell us a little bit about where you are now and what you're doing?
Yeah, so Liberty Mutual. Then I went to AIG, so I benefited from doctoral rotations in both big insurance companies. Um, After AIG, well, I moved from Boston. So Liberty Mutual was in Boston. 2010, I made the move from Boston to New York at AIG, and I really started learning more of the advanced analytics applications that actuarial science can have. So, as an example, in 2013, after I was done with my actuarial exams, I started a course on how to do programming in R language,
Hmm.
open source language. I was leading a team of actuaries and data scientists, so that forced me to, not only bring the rigor of the actuarial profession, but also understand the applications on how can you teach a data scientist to, collaborate with actuaries and bring the best pricing and reserving. My job was mainly around property and casualty insurance at AIG. I moved to consulting because I was always fascinated with just how consulting brings a broader area on types of projects you can work on. And a lot of the projects I was working on and consulting with Ernst& Young, with EY, were on the life side.
Mm.
So think about building labs models for fixed index annuities, the implications they would have on hedging scenarios as a liability management, a lot of work around underwriting models for group benefits. So I spent 8 years at EY. And then I got a call from a company called Databricks
Uh-huh.
almost 2.5 years ago. I heard about them. We at EY had done some implementations on using Databricks as a data platform to ingest your data, process it, and ultimately build predictive models and AI models. And after interviewing and understanding their footprint in insurance and other industries, I fell in love with the company. I always thought that technology looked very interesting. I think it's the future. I joined, and now I what I do for them. My title is I'm a principal. I the global head of insurance here at Databricks, and part of my job is to talk to clients and understand their strategic priorities, bring the perspective on trends, use cases, what is the value that you can drive from all of that.
Uh-huh.
And the other part of my job is actually building technical solutions for clients to implement these use cases and drive the best value of our platform.
All right. So you have an internal as well as an external focus. That must make
Correct.
it much more interesting.
Yes.
You can see the impact that your work is having. So you also have another role, and that is the president of the Organization of Latino Actuaries, right? Um, do you want to tell us a little bit about Ola and the work you're doing?
Yeah, sure. So interestingly enough, when I became an associate of the Casualty Actuarial Societies, and I went to the annual meeting, I remember somebody from IABA speaking about Black actuaries and how the numbers, when you see the numbers of like population of Black actuaries in the US, right? If we concentrate on that for a second, and then you look at how only 2% of actuaries are Black. And he did a very nice job walking through the history of IABA. The first reaction I had was look in the room and see how many actuaries were in the room as well, among thousands of people. And pretty soon I realized that there was a lot of underrepresentation of Latino actuaries as well. So I went to who at that time was, a good friend of mine, Steve Armstrong. Eventually, he became one of the presidents of the CAS. And I told him how I was feeling. I said, listen, like, we have to do something about this. I'm a very proud Latino person. I gave you the background on how, like I left my country for better opportunities here. And I was very lucky to move here. But eventually, I said, like, we need to do something to support the Latino actuaries. So he agreed with me. He said, listen, like, anything I do, to support you, let me know. I very quickly found other individuals that were feeling the same way I was feeling. So specifically Alejandro Ortega, very well-known actuary. I talked to him. We were working at that time together at AIG, and we said, why don't we start something, right? Like, let's start a Latino actuaries organization, and we literally, I will never forget. We were in Seattle. We sat down at the bar and we started thinking about, like, what would be the name, something that people can pronounce, something that, like, it would be like an easy logo. And we found Regina Quintana, who's another one of the co-founders. And long story short, OLA started as an organization, right? It's Organization of Latino Actuaries. Um, I've held multiple roles at OLA, but the main mission was to increase the number of Latino actuaries by increasing the awareness of the profession. And we have been growing pretty quickly, and we're very, very proud of the work that we've done as an organization.
Of course. And can you tell us a little bit about what means you use to increase the number of Latino actuaries?
So, a lot of different initiatives. The first thing we did was, well, getting all of the paperwork needed to officially become a nonprofit organization. I have to admit, we benefited a lot from the path that IABA had already established,
Mm-hmm.
because it was well tried and tested. We thought about corporate sponsorship and what that meant. Of course, like, we wouldn't be able to do any of those things without the support of organizations. So we still work with a lot of, like, the founding partners, companies like New York Life, Willis Towers Watson. They were the first initial companies that believe in our mission and became corporate sponsors. And then from there, now we have some of the largest organizations, including the CAS and the SOA. The other piece I think is very important is marketing. One of the roles I had when before becoming president was director of marketing, because we realized that for for the profession itself, we were using LinkedIn as our marketing platform, and we created an Ola page. We obviously first order of business was just having the Ola website, and we started tracking the membership of Ola with literally just an Excel spreadsheet.
Mhm.
Like who are the members? Like, can we contact them? Can we have events? But that was not really scalable. So something that we started driving a lot of the scalability and fulfilling the mission was, as an example, having Ola Academy, which was targeted towards like students that were aware of the profession, and maybe they really didn't know what an actuary was. So like with All Academy, we have scholarships. We ask people like, why do you want to become an actuary? What are the skills that you have? And we try to do as much as education as possible. Of course, there are big recruiting companies that have done this very well. But what we found is that oftentimes these recruiting organizations only want to talk to you if you already have exams. And what we found is that unfortunately, a lot of Latino actuaries, and this is something very specific to Latinos, they may come from like low level, like low resources, and even their parents, they want them to be doctors, they want them to be lawyers, right? They have no idea of what an actuary is. And I think this is important because if you go back to the first question that you asked me on just how decided to become an actuary, like I went to a private high school, right? So like my professor knew about it, late 90s. I cannot assume that the world is like that right now, especially for people that don't have the luxury of going to private. So that's one thing that we did. The other big component that helped us scale was having the role of program managers. So of course we have members of all aboard, and those are the functions that I told you, right? Like marketing, pipeline, corporate sponsorship, secretary, CFO, all of those roles. But we realized that in order for us to really hit our mission and the growth that we had in our mind, we couldn't do everything ourselves. So we, for every single one of the functions that the all aboard members had, we also opened the possibility of having people being program managers. And what that does is that alleviates a lot of the workload that you would have. Let's say, when I was director of marketing, I didn't know how to build a website. Like, so we outsource some of that, and that helps with increasing capacity. But the other good thing is that as people go from one role to the other, and they move from like being all up board members to presidents, the pipeline for the next round of all board members is effectively the program managers, because
Right.
they're already familiar with what we're doing, and they've been participating in a lot of the things that we've done as a company, like the early career symposium. We meet on a regular basis, and they graduate into being all of our members.
Right. And how does the early career symposium work? What are the elements of that?
So we just had the early career symposium in Las Vegas back in August. It's a big event, and it's basically targeting. It's the laws of supply and demand.
Yeah.
What we do is like we bring students, mainly students that may have a couple of internships, right? But they haven't landed their big actuarial job that, like the one that I was able to land in Liberty Mutual, when I was describing a little bit my career. And we bring the sponsors. We this year we have everybody. We had MetLife, Transamerica. I mean, Willis Towers Watson, the Standard. I mean, Mass Mutual. I can go on and on and on. And we divide the 3-day conference into doing a lot of speed. It's not like speed dating, but it's kind of like you know what I mean, right? Like
Need
just like
interviewing.
students, exactly, speed interviews, help them not only with the resume, a lot of that was done ahead of time, but just prepare them doing dry runs on interviews, finding a lot about what they want in their career. How can you align, or how can they align their strengths and what they were looking for in a job to just like what the job market requirements were right now, and even just something as simple as, are you interested more on property and casualty, or is your interest lying more in life? um, there are obviously, we're seeing some actuaries moving into non-traditional roles. I'm one of the people that work in technology, but there's more. And there's also the a big portion of the sponsors that were there are consulting companies.
Hmm.
So understanding a little bit and just explaining, what is the day of an actuary look like, right? If you work in the industry versus you work in consulting, was something that was extremely helpful. So that was all of that happened, like day one, right? Like it was like the students, board member, program managers were all together. The second day, we did breakfast with the sponsors and the students, board members, where we did a little bit of networking, get to know each other better, and from there, it was the expo where every single sponsor had a booth. And we had our students just going around talking to sponsors. We closed with a ceremony. But what we've heard from a lot of the attendees was that it was a great event. And of course, we are continually measuring and monitoring the return on investment on the event, like thinking about how many of the attendees were able to land a job, the retention on that company. Again, like we're a fairly young organization, but we're definitely putting the emphasis on outcomes.
Sure. And the Academy is a very proud sponsor of OLA, and we'd be delighted to collaborate with you on any events in the future, especially if you have one in DC. We
Yeah,
have our offices here, but please, let's
thank
keep
you.
in touch about that. Thank you for listening to Actuary Voices, the podcast from the American Academy of Actuaries. Please rate and subscribe to this podcast on your preferred podcast listening platform. We're on the web at actuary.org, where you will find a wealth of information about our work and how you can become an Academy volunteer. And now, back to my conversation with Marcela Granados, the president of the Organization of Latino Actuaries. What are your future plans for OLA in the short or medium term?
So there's two areas that we believe that the opportunity lies. So um, if you think about the journey of somebody going to high school and then realizing that they being aware of the profession, realizing that they may want to try to be an actuary, all the way to them landing the job, we think that we do a very good job with that cohort, right? Like the ones that are um, decided to become an actuary, and with some of the initiatives that I mentioned before, right? Like the All Academy Early Career Symposium. We've established, and I would say we're relatively mature. However, we're not very good with the before and the after. So let me explain each one of them. um, it's very hard to, it's easier for us to tackle the universities that offer actuarial science or STEM professions, and making them aware that actuarial career exists, and for them to understand the benefits and measure if they're a good fit. But it's very hard to go to the teenager, somebody that's going into high school, because by definition, right, like we cannot go to all of the high schools, and making them aware of like the actuarial profession. So something that we've been doubling down on the investment is that director of pipeline. And I'm working with organizations, like you said, right, like with you guys and then the other actuary organizations to partner and say, how can we potentially even just send some of our board members or program managers to selected high schools, especially the ones that we know that they have the target Latinos, to let them not only know about what the actuarial profession is, but paint a little bit more of the art of the possible,
Uh-huh.
right? Like, what can an actuary do? Because to be honest with you, like, I think that sometimes the stigma that we have is like we end up working in an insurance company, and while that is great for some of us, like it may not be, the glamorous stuff that somebody wants to do. So definitely on pipeline, right, on like high school students, and not only bring awareness of the profession, but painting the real all of the endless possibilities that an actuary can do, and do it in a scalable way. Now, what I meant about after is we also have found that Latinos, like any other minority, face challenges in moving up and advancing their career. So if you think about the recruiting piece, we're very good at recruiting, but we need to do a better job at retaining and developing these people. So, as an example, when I was at EY, I was very fortunate to be part of an Advancing Latino Executives. It was the ALE program, where a couple of us that were Latinos and up and comers, and they would put us into this program. We would have a coach and mentors that would identify the way that like Latinos think, right, from a neurodiversity perspective, and help us, not only get promoted, right, because I feel like the what you want from a job doesn't necessarily mean getting promoted and becoming a chief actuary, right? Like everybody has different goals, and we find that to be true for a lot of the younger folks. Not everybody wants to be a chief actuary. Not everybody wants to be promoted. People, younger people specifically, are placing a lot of value on work-life balance.
Mhm.
They're placing an incredible amount of value on just having a purpose. And it's something that we had to find as an organization, because most of us are older, and we're all like, yeah, like, like, you want promotion, you want these things, and then we stop to think like, if we're thinking about the long term of this organization, we have to shift towards what the next pool of actuaries would look like, and what do they care about. So along those lines, we launched this year our first Latino leadership program. We evaluated multiple companies, and we went with a company called Redbox that is able to run these Latino leadership workshops. We had, during the early career symposium, we have our first module to just like understand the goals of just like what do people want to get out of the actuarial profession. But that was a very proud moment for us, because for many years we wanted to do something like that, but we didn't have the numbers to just identify people that can be part of this Latino leadership program, because we're a relatively young organization. And now we had 3 OLA board members being part of it, and 14 program managers. And we believe that in the future, we would like that in the future, that we have more and more folks being part of this, and we can measure results on, like they're advancing their career, and they're meeting their goals, whatever those are.
Sure. All that work suggests that you've become a mature organization very quickly. While you may be young in years, there's an awful lot of programmatic work going on. So, congratulations on that.
Thank you. It's all the when I became a president, I always say that I love the fact that I left Ola because I got pregnant, and I believe that if you do something right, especially volunteer work, like you have to be 100% in. So I left Ola, and then I came back by the request of Ola board members, and I was interviewed. They were interviewing me for coming back, and they obviously interviewed me for becoming a president. And something that they asked me was, "What does it mean for you to become president?" I told them that it's not about an accolade, it's not a big title that you put in LinkedIn. It's really about when things are going really well, you give credit to your team, but then when things go wrong, you take the punches. So for me, like, all of these compliments go to the team. I'm just the one that has the title temporarily.
Sure. You mentioned purpose and how younger actuaries see that as being somewhat more important than promotion sometimes. Um, Now, looking back on your career, or looking forward in your career, I wonder what you find most fulfilling about the work you do, either as a member of OLA or a leader of OLA, or in your professional life.
Sounds cheesy, but changing lives. Uh,
Hmm.
I think that when I go back and think about myself, when my math professor said, like, hey, it's a lucrative career, right? Like, I was hustling. I wanted to, be part of this actuarial career. I wanted to pass my exams. I wanted to get promoted. But now I look back, and I just think that it's not only, as you said, the promotion. It's not only the title and the letters. It's about having an impact. So the reason why I went back to Ola is that every single time I get a student telling me, like, hey, the time that you spend talking to me on the phone or doing, video conference, and you gave me feedback on my resume, I was able to get that job. It makes me incredibly proud, because I know that I'm doing something for somebody other than myself. I think that when I look at the leaving Ola and then coming back, looking at how much the organization has grown, as what you said, right? Like, it's maybe not mature as others, but like in the short period of time that we've been in existence, like, seeing the scale and the people that are part of it just fulfilling their dreams, that melts my heart, makes me very proud of, again, not only the board members but also the program managers. And as I said, I think a big realization for me is understanding that people that come from low income, like, they really don't even know about the career. I mean, something else that was an eye opener was us at the board discussing that we're going to do, we had to help people understand where to find at TJ Maxx, or places where people can donate a suit to go to for an interview. I mean, again, when you're working in a profession like this, like, you don't even realize that, there's a whole world out there. And I think that's very important. For my current job here at Databricks, I would say that it's the same. I I look at the insurance companies I'm currently serving, and I see how our platform, like, even though it's data, and how do you deploy with predictive models. At the end of the day, a lot of the benefits come from, like, the infrastructure and productivity. But sometimes we have big numbers and big ambitions, and just how can we help them get to accurate pricing. If you're thinking about PNC, how can we help with, like, expense reduction? How can we, help their people do more valuable work, right? So it's not only the productivity of, like, doing less of the manual work and doing more of the analysis. And having some of my clients, presenting at our conference and being on a stage and talking about how they're driving value of Databricks, makes me incredibly proud. I don't. They always say that the good consultant, or in this case, right, like in my role, it's not me being on a stage, is having my client being on a stage talking about the great work that him or her and the team are doing, and you are in the first row with flashcards, reading, telling them how to look smart. And I think that's true. And I guess, like, the last thing I would say that ties all of this together is that when I joined this company, Databricks, I was the only actuary, and I was even wondering, like, what do they want to talk? What does this tech company wants to talk to an actuary? And I can tell you that every single meeting that I go to, and I have 241 insurance companies as clients, every single doesn't, and my role is global, right? So like I was telling you, I'm going to Mexico next week. I've been to Paris, Switzerland, London, Singapore, Australia, Canada, Colombia, Argentina. Every single time, the moment I say I'm an actuary, people change the way that they look at me. They have tons of respect. The conversation changes from, there's this person that works for a software vendor to like, okay, she must know what she's talking about. You know what I mean? Like, and they bring the fact like, oh, I heard this actuarial profession, there's a lot of rigor, there's a lot of ethics. So something that we've been doing, for the 2.5 years I've been joining is, can we actually make our platform and our product a little bit simpler for the very smart people that may not need to code, right? That may not be technical, they may not be a data scientist, they may not be a data engineering. So now in that equation, I was telling you, when we determine the business value of our platform, one of the personas is the actuaries. So, now I combine in both of my two worlds, where I meet with my friends that are actuaries, and I just say like, hey, tell me, like what you actually do in your current function. And we try to identify areas where a platform like Databricks can actually help them. So that brings obviously a lot of joy, and of course, as I told you, I have a 6-year-old daughter, and I going back to the purpose, and like everybody here is like 10 years younger than I am, and I bring my daughter to work. You know what I mean? Like it's a very startup culture, very different from the one that I had at the early years when I started my career, where people embrace that you may need to leave a meeting because I want to drop off my daughter, I want to pick her up, I want to go to a Valentine's Day party with her.
Sure. You're absolutely right. The skills that an actuary has are eminently transferable to many other walks of life. And I've had several guests on the podcast who don't actually do actuarial work anymore, but they're still purpose driven, and many of them mentioned something that you mentioned about changing people's lives, and that's what drives them. I'd like you to put your predictive hat on now and tell me a little bit about what you think are the challenges facing the actuarial profession.
It's the development piece, right? So going back, drawing the parallel back to all that, right? I don't think that we have a lot of problem anymore just making people aware of just like that the profession exists. Again, other than just the Latino population, right, and maybe other minorities. Um, I think it's just as simple as the supply and demand equation I was talking earlier on, right? Like I remember reading the Wall Street Journal, and number one profession was actuary, right? Which is great for us, right? And that attracted a lot of people. But now, if you think about it, we've grown so much. There's so many actuaries out there that, by definition, right? Like the compensation and the type of job opportunities, like it's not like, the industries that employ actuaries grow at the same rate, and that everybody can have like that type of job. So I still think that the developing on actuaries is somewhere that we face. I vividly remember a lot of actuaries, even at Liberty Mutual, that I started working there in 2005. Very smart people would finish their exams, and they would look at what they were doing, and they would say like, I don't know if this is for me. So again, like those are some of the exception. I mean, of course, most of them find the work fulfilling, but I think that the main challenge is also staying relevant, right? And making people aware of like, yeah, going back to just, okay, you advance your career so much, what do you want to be, right? Like chief actuary, there's only a couple of chief actuaries. I've been going back to Liberty Mutual. Yeah, a lot of the people I started taking exams with, they all have chief actuary titles, right? So you can be chief actuary of pricing, or like reserving, or international. But there has to be other roles that you can play as an actuary. I've seen actuaries being CEOs. Back in Switzerland, head of regulation was an actuary. The head of EY insurance practice in Switzerland is an actuary, right? So, painting that picture on just like how can you use your actuarial skills for literally solving problems. I think like that would increase the relevance and the paths that actuaries can take. The second piece is, going back to the way that the younger generations are thinking, right? So I'll give you the example of us launching our Ola website and launching an Ola site on LinkedIn. We made the mistake earlier on to just say like, okay, well then we realized very quickly that we were not hitting the younger population, and we say how can we make sure that people know what we do and attract people to our events. So we launched a page, an Ola page on Meta, Facebook back
Hmm.
in the day. It was a failure. It was me and Alejandro on Facebook and Meta, and we didn't get any traction. But again, the power of younger people, we brought younger people into the organization that they say, maybe we should have presence in Instagram, maybe we should have presence in TikTok. And now we go back, it's again, it's another proud moment. I didn't come up with the idea, it was just collectively. I look at the TikTok videos and I see who engages with them. And now, we have a lot of like people that are excited about some older students talking about case competition. In Instagram, we have people giving tips on just what they found helpful in getting a career. So just like the expanding the work that we do as actuaries to like all sorts of social media, understanding how the world is currently changing. I think that's another challenge that we identify, but like we should be able to do more as an organization to attract the right talent. And then the third piece, which it's something that I've spent a lot of time as well, is um, helping actuaries collaborate with data scientists. So I totally remember one meeting, one conference I went to in Columbia University here in New York, where we had the CIS president at the time and the SOA president. And we were just asking younger people that were doing a master's in actuarial science in Columbia University about how we, as well, them, because it was them speaking, the two presidents, about how they identified that predictive analytics, and I'm talking about, I don't know, at least like 7 years ago for this event. And both presidents said that they believe predictive analytics was going to be something that actuaries need to be at least capable of just being part of this, right? So you don't necessarily have to be an expert in predictive analytics, but you can apply a lot of the things that you learn in exams, that you learn in the jobs, into just what we used to call in the day predictive analytics. At Liberty was called R&D. Right now, everybody's calling it AI. And I know that both organizations have changed their syllabus to include more material around predictive analytics. The use of like open source language, right? Like R as an example. But I still think that there's a gap where everybody have to, whether you decide that that's what you want to do or not. I think that a lot of the actuaries need to upskill, their understanding of like not only like what role they can play, right? Like I'm not necessarily advocating for an actuary to learn how to code, but you need to know enough to just review what a data scientist produce and understand what are going to be the implications when you put this model into production and this model goes live. So I still think that that's a challenge that I know all actor organizations are aware of it, but we need to move faster to keep the role of an actuary, to again not replace data scientists, but like know how to collaborate with them. Because the way I see it, right, and again I deal with AI on a daily basis. Like people that build AI models, as I say, they sit right outside my little office. uh, they have like big jobs, and like you see the salaries that they get paid and everything, and it's just like it's a brand new career, right? So it's actuaries, and then there's a data scientist. Now you think about data engineers, and I still think that when it comes to dealing with regulators, right, whether it's the NAIC or the Department of Insurance, you would always need an actuary, always, 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 for good reasons. But we as actuaries need to know and learn how to collaborate with the data scientists that builds these models, with the data engineers that get you the data, so that we can still be the line, the layer between all of the work that these great people are doing, but still communicate back to the business.
Sure. No small task. No small task.
Yes.
We're drawing to a close now, Marcela. Is there anything else you'd like to cover?
I would like to conclude by just saying that I'm a very, very proud actuary. Uh, I think that if my daughter decides to be an actuary, my husband is an actuary as well. So it's just,
Your daughter has no chance.
yeah, exactly. So when she was 1 year old, she got a calculator. But I think that there's so much opportunities for actuaries, not only in, the ones that are in current traditional roles, but the ones that explore other opportunities. Because, as I said, you would always need an actuary. I mean, an actuary can be anybody that can solve a business problem, and having the skills to articulate. That's something else. That's an area that a lot of actuaries are really good at. Communication, right? Like people, like after I was, I'll give you the example, right? For this early career symposium of OLA, I was reviewing the applications of like the top students to give them the scholarship. And two things that caught my attention, was that one of them is actually a bad use of technology. There were people that were using ChatGPT. A lot of them were using ChatGPT to answer the questions on like what skill set will help you become an actuary, and like, what do you think you would be right for the profession? And that's wrong, right? I think that understanding how, like, using technology to help you be more productive and embracing technology, I'm all for it. What's not correct is just like being naive enough to thinking that you can use ChatGPT to give you uh, an essay on getting a scholarship. But then the other piece that got me thinking was, just actuaries writing a lot about, like, yeah, like I'm good at math, and like I think that that's going to help me on my career, because, as I said, right, like, it's being good at math is good, but you also need to work a little bit on your soft skills. And what I advise always actuaries to do, depending on where they are, right? But building your own brand, I think it's incredibly important. Being a thought leader, it's important. I really applaud the work that all the actor organizations do in conferences to give people the opportunity to speak, because whether you are in a public facing role or not, I think that having that killer combination of obviously being good at math, which comes with just the rigor of passing sectoral exams. Everybody that passes sectoral exams, by definition, we're like in like the same level, or like common level. But if you're able to bring that storytelling piece and being good at articulating your value or answering a question in a way that is compelling, I feel like you become kind of like the unicorn, right? That gives you job security and allows you to have the flexibility to jump across multiple flavors of the doctoral career.
Sure. Well, I can honestly say that some of the best communicators I've ever met have been actuaries, and they've been able to get across some very complex ideas in ways that non-mathematically inclined people can understand. That's no small skill, and as you say, it's a vitally important one. Marcela Granados, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, David. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Actuary Voices, the podcast from the American Academy of Actuaries. Today, I was talking to Marcela Granados, the president of the Organization of Latino Actuaries, who can be found online at latinoactuaries.org. You can find out more about the American Academy of Actuaries at our website, actuary.org. And please rate and subscribe to this podcast on your preferred podcast listening platform.